The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth Standard Time. Admiral Park was sleeping in her quarters on the orbital station above Mars when her communicator began to flash red. Red meant urgent. Red meant trouble. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling for a moment. At 52 years old, she had learned to take a breath before reacting to bad news. Bad news would still be bad after she took that breath, but she would be calmer. She sat up and touched the communicator. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the seal of the United Earth Government. Below it, a single line of text: Priority Alpha transmission from the Galactic Union. Your presence required immediately. Read the message twice. Then she got out of bed and started putting on her uniform. The Galactic Union, 12 alien species that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 300 years ago. In the eyes of the Union, humans were children, worse than children. They were newcomers who had not earned their place among the stars. Had dealt with the Union before. She had attended meetings where alien diplomats looked at her like she was an insect that had crawled into their home. She had smiled politely while they explained, in careful words, that humanity needed to learn its place. She had never liked those meetings. 30 minutes later, she was in a shuttle heading toward Earth. The blue planet grew larger in the viewport and allowed herself a moment to appreciate its beauty. She had been born on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. She had grown up in underground tunnels, mining ice for the colonies. Earth had always seemed like a dream to her when she was young, a place with open skies and real sunlight. Now she visited Earth often for meetings and ceremonies, but it still took her breath away sometimes. The shuttle landed at the United Earth Government headquarters in Geneva. President was waiting for her in his office. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. Running a planet was difficult work. Running a planet that was trying to find its place in a hostile galaxy was even harder. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said as entered. "What happened?" President gestured for her to sit down. Then he activated a holographic display. It showed a star map with a system highlighted in red. The Vega system. 3 months ago, we established a colony in the Vega system, he said. The system was listed as unclaimed in all Galactic Union records. We followed every rule. We filed every document. Everything was legal. Nodded, she knew about the Vega colony. It was a small settlement, only about 10,000 people, mostly scientists and farmers trying to build something new. Yesterday, we received a message from the Galactic Union, President continued. They say the Vega system falls within ancestral space. They say we have committed aggressive territorial encroachment. Felt her jaw tighten, though of course. They were one of the 12 ruling species of the Union. They were massive creatures, covered in armored plates, with 6 limbs and a bad temper. They had conquered dozens of worlds in their history. They viewed other species as either useful or worthless. Humans, in their eyes, were worthless. They want us to send a representative to the Celestial Accord Station, President said. We have to answer for our actions in front of the full council. If we refuse, they will impose sanctions, trade restrictions, travel bans, maybe worse. And if we go? President was quiet for a moment. Every species that has challenged the council has lost. Some were crushed economically. Others were conquered militarily. The Union has 50,000 years of experience in keeping younger species in line. Looked at the star map. The Vega system was a small point of light so far from Earth, but it represented something important. It represented humanity's future, their growth, their refusal to stay in one small corner of the galaxy. "Who are you sending?" she asked. President turned off the display and looked directly at her. "You." Blinked. "Me, I am not a diplomat, I am a naval officer." "I know." The president leaned forward. "The diplomats want to send someone who will apologize, someone who will bow and scrape and beg for mercy. The military wants to send a fleet to show strength, which would be suicide against the Union. So you are sending me. I am sending someone who will not apologize for humanity's existence. Someone who has faced impossible situations before and survived. Someone who grew up mining ice on Europa and became an admiral through nothing but hard work and determination. Was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the council chamber. She had seen pictures of it. A vast amphitheater filled with ancient beings who had been ruling the galaxy since before humans learned to write. They would look down at her from their towering seats. They would expect her to be afraid. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. President stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the city below, at the millions of humans going about their lives. Most of them had no idea that their future might be decided in an alien chamber far from Earth. "I want you to represent us," he said. "Not the version of us they expect to see, not the weak, short-lived creatures they think we are. I want you to show them what humanity really is. And if they decide to punish us anyway." The president turned back to her. There was something hard in his eyes, something that reminded of the miners she had grown up with. People who had faced the cold emptiness of space every day and refused to let it break them. "Then we will deal with that when it comes, but I will not have humanity bow to anyone. We have worked too hard and come too far." Stood up, she straightened her uniform and looked at the president. "When do I leave?" "Tomorrow. You can take a small escort ship, nothing too aggressive. We do not want to give them an excuse." Nodded. She was already thinking about what she would need. Supplies, data files on the council members, information about the Celestial Accord station. "One more thing," President said as she turned to leave. "Take Lieutenant Han with you. He is young, but he is smart, and he believes in humanity's future." He was 28 years old, fresh-faced and eager. He had graduated top of his class from the Naval Academy. Some people thought he was too idealistic. Thought idealism was exactly what humanity needed right now. "I will contact him," she said. She left the president's office and walked through the long hallways of the government building. People passed her, busy with their own work. None of them knew where she was going or what she would face when she got there. That night, sat alone in her temporary quarters on Earth. She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was the Celestial Accord station. Somewhere out there were beings who thought humanity was nothing more than vermin that had crawled out of the dirt. She thought about her childhood on Europa. The cold, the darkness, the endless work. She thought about every obstacle she had faced in her life and every time she had been told she was not good enough. She had proven them wrong every single time. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey to prove them wrong again. Closed her eyes and allowed herself to sleep. She would need her strength for what was coming. The council expected humanity to send someone who would be afraid. They were going to be very surprised. The journey through hyperspace took 11 days. Admiral Park spent most of that time reading. She read about the Galactic Union. She read about its 12 ruling species. She read about every decision the Council had made in the last 1,000 years. Lieutenant Han sat across from her in the small ship's common area. He was reading the same files, but his face showed more emotion than hers. Sometimes he would shake his head. Sometimes he would mutter something under his breath. Once, he slammed his hand on the table. "This is not fair," he said. "The Vega system was listed as unclaimed. We checked 3 times before we sent colonists. This is just an excuse to bully us." Looked up from her reading. "You are correct, it is not fair." "Then why are we even going? Why do we have to answer to them?" "Because they are stronger than us, for now." Fell silent. He was young, and young people often believed that being right was enough. Had learned a long time ago that being right meant nothing if you did not have the power to back it up. But she had also learned something else. Power was not just about ships and weapons. Power was about will, about determination, about the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seemed certain. On the 12th day, they dropped out of hyperspace near the Celestial Accord station, gasped when he saw it through the viewport. The station was enormous. It was the size of a small moon, built from materials that humanity could not identify. It hung in space like a jewel, glowing with lights from 1,000 windows. Ships from dozens of species flew around it, coming and going from hundreds of docking ports. "It is beautiful," whispered. Nodded, "It is meant to impress visitors, to make them feel small." "Is it working?" Allowed herself a small smile. "Ask me again after we leave." Their ship was directed to a docking port reserved for minor species. The port was far from the main areas of the station, tucked away in a section that felt almost forgotten. Noticed this but said nothing. Every insult was being recorded in her mind, every small act of disrespect. A guide was waiting for them when they stepped off the ship. It was a floating sphere, about the size of a human head, covered in blinking lights. A mechanical voice came from it. "Welcome to the Celestial Accord. You are representatives of the human species. You have been summoned to appear before the Grand Council. Please follow me." The sphere floated away without waiting for a response, and followed. They walked through long corridors filled with alien beings. Some were tall and thin. Some were short and round. Some floated. Some crawled. Some had no shape that could describe. Most of them ignored the two humans. A few looked at them with curiosity. One or two looked at them with open contempt. Stayed close to. His hand rested on the small ceremonial blade at his belt. It was not a real weapon, just a symbol of his rank, but it seemed to comfort him. The guide sphere led them through a massive doorway into the Grand Council chamber. Had seen pictures, but pictures could not capture the reality. The chamber was a vast amphitheater, larger than any stadium on Earth. Seats rose up in every direction, arranged in rings that climbed toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. Thousands of beings filled those seats. Representatives, advisors, observers from across the galaxy. At the highest point of the chamber sat the 12 ruling species. Each delegation had its own section, decorated with symbols and colors that represented their civilization. There were there crystalline beings that glowed with inner light. They communicated through musical sounds that translators converted to speech. They were ancient and proud, and believed that physical beings were primitive. They were there, massive and armored. Commander sat at the front of their delegation, his 4 eyes fixed on with open hatred. His species had conquered worlds. They had crushed rebellions. They did not like being challenged by anyone, especially not by soft, weak creatures like humans. There were there elegant beings with long limbs and clicking mandibles. Envoy watched with what might have been interest or might have been hunger. It was hard to tell with insect faces. And at the very top, in the position of highest authority, sat High Arbiter of the. He was tall and thin, with silver skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. They had founded the Galactic Union 50,000 years ago. They considered themselves the wise elders of the galaxy. Was directed to a small platform in the center of the chamber. It was raised just enough to make her visible to everyone, but not enough to give her any sense of power. She was surrounded on all sides by beings who had ruled the stars since before humanity existed. Was taken to an observation gallery at the side of the chamber. He looked worried but gave him a small nod. She needed him to watch, to remember, to record everything that happened here. High Arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber. It was deep and cold, like wind moving through an empty canyon. "You are Admiral Park of the human species." "I am." "You have been brought before this council to answer for your species' actions. 3 months ago, humans established a settlement in the Vega system. This system falls within territory claimed by the Dominion. You have committed aggressive territorial encroachment." Kept her voice calm. High Arbiter, the Vega system, was listed as unclaimed in the Galactic Union's official records. We checked before sending colonists. We followed every rule. A rumbling sound came from the delegation. Commander leaned forward. The records were outdated. The Vega system has been ancestral space for 10,000 years. Your kind simply moved too quickly, like vermin scurrying into a home that does not belong to them. Felt the insult like a slap. Vermin. That was what they thought of humanity, animals, pests. She kept her face still. She did not react. If the records were wrong, she said, then perhaps the Union should update them. We acted in good faith based on the information available to us. High Arbiter raised a thin hand. The question of record-keeping is not why you are here. You are here because humanity has shown a pattern of aggressive expansion. In 300 years, you have spread from one planet to 47 colonies. You move faster than any species in recorded history. The Council wishes to understand your intentions. Looked up at the High Arbiter. Our intentions are to survive, to grow, to find our place among the stars. Your place, Commander growled, is where the Council decides it is. You do not get to choose. You have not earned that right. More sounds of agreement came from around the chamber. The chimed in harmony. The clicked their mandibles. Even species did not recognize made sounds that clearly meant approval. They had already made up their minds, understood that now. This was not a trial. This was not a chance to defend humanity. This was a demonstration, a show of power meant to remind humans of their place in the galaxy, but had not come here to accept defeat. She stood on that small platform, surrounded by ancient beings who thought she was nothing, and she waited. Let them talk. Let them make their speeches. Let them insult humanity as much as they wanted. When her moment came, she would be ready. For 2 hours, Admiral Park stood on that platform and listened to the galaxy tell her that humanity was worthless. The first to speak was Envoy of the diplomat moved to a speaking platform with graceful steps, its long limbs clicking against the floor. When it spoke, its mandibles moved in patterns that the translator converted to a smooth, almost pleasant voice. The Council has requested a historical analysis of the human species, said. I have prepared this analysis based on records obtained from human databases and our own observations. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed Earth, blue and green and beautiful. Humans evolved on this world approximately 300,000 years ago, continued. For most of that time, they remained primitive. They fought each other constantly. They killed each other over resources, over territory, over ideas. They nearly destroyed their own planet through pollution and neglect. The display changed to show images of war, explosions, destroyed cities, suffering. In their relatively brief history, humans have engaged in thousands of wars. They have killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization, and they came very close to using them. Watched the display without expression. Everything said was true. Humanity's history was violent, bloody, full of terrible mistakes. They nearly made themselves extinct before they even reached the stars, said. One must ask, if they could not govern one planet peacefully, how can they be trusted with 47 colonies? How can they be trusted with access to the wider galaxy? Sounds of agreement rippled through the chamber, heard clicking and humming and rumbling from every direction. Turned to look at her directly. I mean no disrespect, Admiral, but the evidence is clear. Humans are an unstable species. Your expansion should be limited for your own protection as much as for the protection of others. Returned to its seat. The delegation clicked their mandibles in approval. Next came the representative. It did not have a name that human vocal cords could produce, so it was simply called the voice. It floated to the speaking platform, a being of pure crystal that glowed with soft blue light. The voice spoke in tones that sounded like music. The translator converted them to words, but something was lost. The condescension, however, came through perfectly. "We have observed humans for 300 years," the voice sang. "We have tried to understand them. It has been difficult." The crystal being pulsed with light as it continued. "Human minds are chaotic. Their thoughts jump from subject to subject without pattern. They are driven by emotions that cloud their judgment. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic." Thought about arguing this point, but she stayed silent. Let them speak. Let them reveal themselves. "Most troubling is the voice continued. Humans live for such a short time, 100 years, perhaps a few more with their medical technology. In that brief moment they must learn everything, experience everything, achieve everything. It makes them desperate, reckless." The crystal being turned toward, its light flickered in what might have been pity. "What wisdom can such short-lived creatures offer? By the time they begin to understand the universe, they die. Their knowledge is lost. Their children must learn everything again. It is tragic, really. They are like mayflies, living and dying so quickly that they can never see the larger patterns." More agreement from the chamber. Notice that even some of the smaller species, the ones with less power, were nodding or making sounds of approval. They had learned to agree with their masters. Then Commander of the stood up. He did not go to the speaking platform. He simply stood at his seat, his massive form towering over everyone around him. "Enough of this gentle talk," he growled. "Let me speak plainly." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what they were capable of. Activated his own holographic display. It showed images of human soldiers, men and women in military uniforms, holding weapons, standing in formation. "Look at them," said. "Look at what the humans call their warriors." He expanded the images, showing human bodies in detail. No armor plates, no natural weapons, no scales or shells or anything to protect them. "They are soft," said. "Their skin tears easily. Their bones break. They have no claws, no fangs, no venom. They are slow compared to many species. They are weak compared to most." He pulled up more images, humans next to. The difference was obvious. A warrior stood 3 meters tall and weighed as much as a small vehicle. A human looked like a child next to them. "They evolved as prey," continued. "On there they were hunted by larger animals. They survived by hiding, by running, by being clever instead of strong." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And now these prey animals come before us and claim they deserve a place among the stars. They take our territory and call it expansion. They spread across the galaxy like a disease and call it progress." His voice grew louder. "I say enough. I say we stop them now before they spread further, before they cause real damage. We should put them back in their place, remind them that they are nothing compared to the great civilizations of this galaxy." The delegation roared in approval. Other species joined in, making their own sounds of agreement. The chamber shook with the noise. Lieutenant Han watched from the observation gallery with clenched fists. His face was red with anger. He wanted to shout, to defend his species, to tell these aliens that they were wrong. But he stayed silent as Admiral Park had ordered. "Watch, remember, record." High Arbiter raised his hand for silence. The chamber slowly quieted down. The leader looked down with his 4 eyes. His silver face showed no emotion, but his voice carried a cold satisfaction. "Admiral Park," he said, "you have heard the concerns of this council. You have heard the history of your species recounted. You have heard the assessment of your people's nature and capabilities." Looked up at him but said nothing. "The council has deliberated," continued. "We have reached a decision. Humanity will withdraw from the Vega system within 1 standard year. You will pay reparations to the Dominion for your encroachment on their ancestral territory. And you will accept a provisional observer who will monitor your species' activities to ensure no further incidents." He leaned forward slightly. These terms are not negotiable. They are the price you pay for your mistakes. Still said nothing. His voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost kind, the way an adult might speak to a child who had been caught misbehaving. Do you understand your place now, human? The question hung in the air. Every being in the chamber waited for to respond. They waited for her to bow her head, to apologize, to accept the judgment of her betters. Lieutenant held his breath. His heart was pounding. He had never felt so helpless in his life. Admiral Park stood perfectly still on that platform. She looked at High Arbiter. She looked at Commander. She looked at Envoy and the Voice, and all the other beings who had spent the last 2 hours explaining why humanity was worthless. And then slowly, she raised her right hand. Admiral Park raised her right hand, and the chamber fell completely silent. Every eye, every sensory organ in that vast space turned toward the small human woman standing on the platform below. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if she had all the time in the universe. She extended a single finger, her index finger, and she pointed it directly at High Arbiter. The gesture meant nothing to the aliens. They did not understand it, but they felt the weight of it somehow. The confidence, the complete lack of fear. Lowered her hand and began to speak. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying across the chamber with a strength that seemed impossible for such a small body. "You call us fragile," she said. "You call us short-lived, you call us prey." She paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with each delegation in turn. "You are right, we are all of those things." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the audience. This was not what they expected. They expected denial. They expected excuses. They expected the human to argue. "We have no armor," continued. "No claws, no venom. Our skin tears easily, as Commander pointed out. Our bones break. We are not fast. We are not strong. And yes, our lives are short. 100 years, maybe a little more. A single moment compared to the of Aura." She began to walk slowly around the platform, not packing nervously but moving with purpose, claiming the space as her own. "But let me tell you something about being prey." She stopped and looked up at the delegation. Commander stared back at her with barely concealed contempt. "On our we were hunted," said. "You are correct about that. There were animals faster than us, stronger than us. Animals with teeth and claws that could tear us apart. We should have gone extinct. Every logical calculation said we would die." She paused, but we did not die. The chamber was utterly silent now. Even Commander had stopped sneering. "Do you know what we did instead? We learned to run, not to escape, Commander, to chase. We call it persistence hunting. We would pick an animal and we would follow it, not quickly. We are not fast, but we would follow it for hours, for days sometimes. The animal would run and we would walk. The animal would rest and we would keep coming. Eventually the animal's heart would give out. Eventually it would fall, and we would be there." His voice grew harder. "We did not need to be faster. We did not need to be stronger. We just needed to not stop. We just needed to refuse to give up. That is what prey does when it wants to survive. It becomes something else entirely." She turned to face the voice. The crystal being glowed softly, watching her. "You say our minds are chaotic. Our thoughts jump around. We make decisions based on feelings." Nodded. "This is true, but do you know what else is true? When we could not fly, we built machines that could. When we could not survive in the cold, we made fire and clothing. When we could not live underwater, we built submarines. When we could not survive in space, we built ships." She raised her arms slightly, gesturing at the station around them. "Every single limitation you mock is a problem we have already solved. You think our short lives make us weak. They make us urgent. We do not have time to wait for the perfect moment. We do not have time to study for 1,000 years before acting. We must do everything now in the brief time we have. And so we do." Turned to face the full council. Her voice rose, not shouting, but filling the chamber with an intensity that made everyone lean forward. In 300 years, we went from a single planet to 47 colonies. 300 years. Do you understand what that means? To your species, 300 years is nothing. A moment. A blink of an eye. To us, it is generations. It is millions of lives, each one short, each one pushing forward, each one building on what came before. She pointed up at the ceiling, at the stars beyond. And we have something else. Something I think you have forgotten in your 50,000 years of power. High Arbiter's four eyes narrowed. And what is that, human? Hunger. The word seemed to echo through the chamber. Not hunger for food, continued. Hunger for more, for everything, for the unknown. You have mapped this galaxy and called it enough. You have drawn your borders and stopped expanding. You have reached a comfortable place and decided to stay there forever. She shook her head slowly. We have not, we never will. We look at the stars and we see possibilities. We see places we have never been, things we have never learned, secrets we have never uncovered. And we want them. We want them with every fiber of our being. Commander slammed his massive fist against his seat. You speak of hunger. We will show you hunger when the fleets reduce your colonies to ash. Turned to face him directly. She was tiny compared to him, an insect compared to a mountain, but she did not flinch. You could do that, she said quietly. You could destroy our colonies, kill our people, burn everything we have built. She took a step toward the delegation. But we would survive. Some of us would escape. Some of us would hide. And those survivors would have children. And those children would remember what you did. And they would come back. Her voice dropped to something almost gentle. We always come back, Commander. That is what prey does. That is what creatures who refuse to die do. You could hunt us for 1,000 years and there would still be humans somewhere, rebuilding, planning, growing stronger. She turned back to face High Arbiter. You want to sanction us. Go ahead. You want to isolate us. Try, but understand something very clearly. Raised her single finger again, pointing at the High Arbiter. In another 300 years, where do you think we will be? If we went from one planet to 47 in the last 300 years, what will we have in the next 300? And in 1,000 years, when your children's children look up at the stars, who do you think will be looking back? The chamber was completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. High Arbiter stared at the human woman for a long moment. His four eyes blinked one at a time, slowly, in sequence. You threaten us? He finally asked. No, shook her head. I am not threatening anyone. I am telling you the truth. The same truth that you have ignored because it was easier to dismiss us as vermin. She spread her hands. I am also offering you a choice. A choice? Yes, you can treat us as vermin to be controlled. You can impose your sanctions and your observers and your restrictions, and we will resist. We will adapt. We will overcome. It is what we do. It is what we have always done. Paused and let the words sink in. Or you can treat us as partners, equals, not because we have earned it by your standards, but because you recognize what we will become, what we are already becoming. She looked around the chamber one more time. Work with us, and we will build things together that neither of us could build alone, things that will make this galaxy better, things that will last long after your 50,000 years of power are forgotten. High Arbiter said nothing. The entire council said nothing. In the observation gallery, Lieutenant Han wiped tears from his eyes. He had never felt so proud to be human. Admiral Park stood alone on that platform, surrounded by ancient beings who had spent 2 hours trying to make her feel small. She had answered them with a single finger and the truth about her species. Now she waited to see what they would do with it. The silence in the Grand Council chamber lasted for what felt like an eternity. Admiral Park stood on her platform, waiting. She had said everything she needed to say. Now it was up to them. High Arbiter was the first to move. He leaned back in his seat and studied the human woman below with new interest. His four eyes moved independently, examining her from different angles, as if seeing her for the first time. Commander broke the silence with a growl. "This is ridiculous. She threatens us with fairy tales about the future. She offers nothing but words. I say we proceed with the sanctions and show these humans what real power looks like." But the voice made a soft, chiming sound that the translator converted to words. "She is not afraid. That is unusual. We have seen many species stand where she stands. Most of them tremble, most of them beg. This one does neither." "Because she is foolish," snarled. "Because she does not understand what we can do to her kind." Envoy of the raised a long limb for attention. "Perhaps. Or perhaps she understands exactly what we can do, and she is telling us that it will not matter. That is a very different kind of statement." The council began to murmur among itself, watched as the 12 ruling species talked to their advisors, consulted their records, and argued in whispers and clicks and hums. This was not what they had expected. They had expected the human to break, to apologize, to accept their judgment. She had done none of those things. Lieutenant Han watched from the observation gallery with his heart pounding. He could see the uncertainty spreading through the chamber. These beings had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. They were used to obedience. They were used to fear. Admiral Park had given them neither. After several minutes, High Arbiter raised his hand for silence. The chamber slowly quieted down. "Admiral Park," he said. His voice was different now. Still cold, but with something else underneath. Respect, curiosity, could not tell. High Arbiter responded. "You have given this council much to consider. Your species is young. Your history is brief. By any objective measure, you should be nothing more than a minor nuisance in the grand story of this galaxy." Said nothing, she simply waited. "And yet," continued, "you stand before us without fear. You speak of what humanity will become as if it is certain. You offer partnership to beings who have existed since before your kind learned to walk upright." He paused. "That takes either great foolishness or great confidence, perhaps both." "I know what humanity is capable of," said. "I have seen it my entire life. I have seen people who should have given up refuse to stop. I have seen colonies built in impossible places. I have seen scientists solve problems that everyone said could not be solved. We are not perfect. We make mistakes. We hurt each other sometimes, but we also never stop trying to be better." The voice chimed again. "She believes what she says. I can sense it. There is no deception in her words." Commander shifted uncomfortably. He was not used to situations he could not solve with force. "So, what are we supposed to do? Let them keep the Vega system. Let them continue expanding wherever they want." High Arbiter was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "The Council will reconsider its position on the Vega system. We will reconvene in 3 cycles to discuss revised terms." Roared in protest. "This is unacceptable. The humans have violated our space and you want to discuss revised terms." "I want to avoid making an enemy that our descendants will regret," said sharply. "If this human is correct, if her species truly cannot be stopped, then crushing them now will only ensure that they hate us forever. I would rather have them as partners than as enemies who hunt us through the centuries." The commander fell silent, but his face showed his anger clearly. "Turn back to, this is not a victory, Admiral Park. The Council has not decided in your favor. We have simply decided to think more carefully before acting." Nodded. "That is all I ask. Think carefully. Consider what we could build together instead of what you could destroy." The session was formally ended. Representatives began to leave the chamber, talking among themselves. The energy in the room had completely changed. When arrived, humanity had been a joke, a nuisance to be dealt with quickly and forgotten. Now, humanity was a question without an easy answer. Rushed from the observation gallery to meet as she left the platform. His eyes were bright with emotion. "Admiral, that was incredible. What you said in there about persistence hunting, about hunger, about never stopping. I have never heard anyone speak like that before. Gave him a small smile. I just told them the truth. Most people do not believe it because they have never been pushed hard enough to discover it for themselves. They walked through the corridors of the Celestial Accord Station together. Now, instead of ignoring them, aliens stopped to stare. Word had spread quickly through the station. The human who had stood before the council and refused to bow. The human who had pointed a single finger at the High Arbiter and told him what the future would hold. Some looked at them with new respect. Some looked at them with fear. Some looked at them with hatred. But no one looked at them like they were insignificant anymore. As they approached their ship, Envoy appeared from a side corridor. The diplomat moved gracefully toward them on its long limbs. Admiral Park said, "A moment of your time, if you please." Stopped Envoy. The studied her with compound eyes that showed nothing. I have been part of this council for over 200 years. I have seen many species come before us. I have never seen one refuse to be afraid. Fear is a choice, said. I chose not to make it. Clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. There were once like your species. Long ago, before we joined the Union, we were also underestimated. We were also dismissed as inferior. We proved them wrong. How? By being useful, by being patient, by waiting for the right moment to show our true value. Leaned closer. I do not know if humanity will succeed in its ambitions, but I believe you are right about one thing. Your species cannot be ignored anymore. Stepped back and walked away without another word. Stared after was that a threat or a compliment? Maybe both, said. In politics, they are often the same thing. They boarded their ship and began the journey back to Earth. As the Celestial Accord Station shrank in the viewport, finally allowed himself to relax. Admiral, he said quietly, do you really believe what you said in there? About humanity never stopping, about us looking back at them from the stars in 1,000 years. Looked out at the stars. Each one was a sun. Each sun might have planets. Each planet might have life or could support life someday. The galaxy was vast and full of possibilities. I believe that we have a choice, she said. We can accept the limits others put on us, or we can refuse to accept them. Every time in history that someone said humans could not do something, someone else proved them wrong. That is who we are. That is what makes us different. She turned to face him. The question is not whether I believe it. The question is whether you believe it, whether every human who hears about what happened today believes it. Thought about this for a long time. He thought about his parents, who had worked their whole lives to give him a better future. He thought about his grandparents, who had survived wars and famines and still kept hopping. He thought about every human being who had ever refused to give up. I believe it, he said. Nodded, good, because we have a lot of work to do. 60 years later, Admiral Park's speech was taught in every school on Earth. They called it the Finger Address, and it became the most famous moment in humanity's galactic history. The words she spoke in that chamber were carved into monuments and printed in textbooks. They inspired generations of humans to reach for the stars. The Vega system remained a human colony. The Council reconsidered and reconsidered again, and eventually decided that the cost of removing the humans was too high. Humanity kept expanding. They did not stop. They never stopped. And by the time Park died at the age of 127, surrounded by her children, and humanity held voting seats on the Galactic Council. Not provisional, not observer. Full members. The plaque outside the Diplomatic Academy on Earth bore a single line attributed to her. They asked if we knew our place. We told them we would make our own. And they did.